Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of the Cosmic Wizard Show. We have a really exciting new moon coming up this week that I think is going to be an amazing catalyst for deep healing if we want to use it in that sort of intentional way. This is just going to be a solo episode with me. I'm going to dig in a little bit of ways to use this new moon energy. I call this the Cosmic Wizard Show because of an experience that I had a couple years ago where I realized that if I just lived life more like a wizard every day, then that's the direction to go in, right? But I've got a witch side too that's been there for a very, very long time, and often, when I was first getting started too in digging back into astrology, a lot of it was using it for witchcraft type healing sort of purposes. So that's a lot of where my personal practice focus is on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the potential for what we can do with these elements in this show, but I'd just like to start it off with a story. Give me 1 second, I'm going to pull it up. Okay, so every time I try and dig into the mythology of Pisces, I always feel myself more confused than when I started, to be honest, which is fitting for Pisces. It's sort of that Neptunian vibe. It's ethereal. It can't quite be grasped, But this story that I'm going to read is something that left a pretty major effect on me. I think about it reasonably often. It's great, and I would like to share it with you guys. So I'm just going to read it. Let's see here. So I'm finding it on zodiacreads.com. I'll put the link to it in the show notes, but it seems to originally come from Karmic Astrology, the Moon's Nodes and Reincarnation by Martin Schulman. So this is sort of like an origin story, and it's great. So this story is, it explains it, okay. And it was morning as God stood before his 12 children, and into each of them planted the seed of human life. One by one, each child stepped forward to receive his appointed gift. To you, Aries, I give the seed first that you might have the honor of planting it, that for every seed you plant 1 million more will multiply in your hand. You will not have time to see the seed grow, for everything you plant creates more that must be planted. You will be the first to penetrate the soil of people's minds with my idea. But it is not your job to nourish the idea, nor to question it. Your life is action, and the only action I ascribe to you is to begin making men aware of my creation. For your good work, I give you the virtue of self-esteem. Quietly, Aries stepped back to his place. To you, Taurus, I give the power to build the seed into substance. Your job is a great one, requiring patience, for you must finish all that has been started, or the seeds will be wasted to the wind. You are not to question or change your mind in the middle, nor to depend on others for what I ask you to do. For this, I give you the gift of strength. Use it wisely. And Taurus stepped back into place. To you, Gemini, I give the questions without the answers so that you may bring to all an understanding of what people see around them. You will never know why people speak or listen, but in your quest for the answer, you will find my gift of knowledge. And Gemini stepped back into place. To you, Cancer, I ascribe the task of teaching people about emotion. My idea is for you to cause them laughter and tears so that all they see and think develops fullness from inside. For this, I give you the gift of family, that your fullness may multiply. And Cancer steps back into place. To you, Leo, I give the job of displaying my creation in all its brilliance to the world. But you must be careful of pride and always remember that it is my creation, not yours. For if you forget this, people will scorn you. There is much joy in the job I give you if you do it well. For this, you are to have the gift of honor. And Leo steps back into place. To you, Virgo, I ask for an examination of all that humankind has done with my creation. You are to scrutinize their ways sharply and remind them of their errors, so that through them my creation may be perfected. For doing this, I give you the gift of purity of thought. And Virgo stepped back into place. To you, Libra, I give the mission of service, that humans will be mindful of their duties to others, that they may learn cooperation, as well as the ability to reflect on the other side of their actions. I will put you everywhere there is discord, and for your efforts, I will give you the gift of love. And Libra stepped back into place. To you, Scorpio, I give a very difficult task. You will have the ability to know the minds of the other people, but I do not permit you to speak about what you learn. Many times you will be pained by what you see, and in your pain you will turn away from me and forget that it is not I, but the perversion of my idea that is causing your pain. You will see so much of humankind that you will come to know them as animals, and will wrestle so much with the animal instincts in yourself that you will lose your way. But when you finally come back to me, Scorpio, I have for you the supreme gift of purpose. And Scorpio stepped back. To Sagittarius, I ask that you make people laugh, for amidst their misunderstanding of my idea, they become bitter. Through laughter, you are to give people hope, and through hope, turn their eyes back to me. You will touch many lives, if but for a moment, and you will know the restlessness in every life you touch. To you, Sagittarius, I give the gift of infinite abundance, that you may spread wide enough to reach every corner of darkness and bring it light. And Sagittarius stepped back into place. To you, Capricorn, I ask the toil of your brow, that you may teach people to work. Your task is not an easy one, for you will feel all of humankind's labors on your shoulders, but the yoke of your burdens contains the responsibility of your brothers and sisters, which I put into your hands. And Capricorn stepped back into place. To you, Aquarius, I give the concept of the future, that people might see other possibilities. You will have the pain of loneliness, for I do not allow you to personalize my love. But for turning people's eyes to new possibilities, I give the gift of freedom, that in your liberty you may continue to serve humankind wherever they need you. And Aquarius stepped back into place. To you, Pisces, I give the most difficult task of all. I ask you to collect all the world's sorrows and return them to me. Your tears are to be ultimately my tears. The sorrow you will absorb is the effect of people's misunderstanding of my idea, but you are to give them compassion that they may try again. For this, the most difficult task of all, I give you the greatest gift of all. You will be the only one. You will be the only one of my 12 children to understand me. This gift of understanding is for you, Pisces. For when you try to spread it to humankind, they will not listen. And Pisces stepped back into place. And the children left, each determined to do his job best that he might to receive his gift. But none fully understood his task or his gift. And when they returned puzzled, God said, "You each believe that the other gifts are better. Therefore, I will allow you to trade." And for the moment, each child was elated as he considered all the possibilities of his new mission. But God smiled as he said, "You will return to me many times, asking to be relieved of your mission, and each time I will grant your wish." You will go through countless incarnations before you complete the original mission I've prescribed for you. I give you countless time in which to do it, but only when it is done can you be with me. I was curious if I was going to get through it this time without crying, which I didn't. But I chose to read it because, like, every time I read this story, it makes me cry. And I feel like I don't know, just that, like, Pisces end one, it gets me every single time. And so when Pisces season comes along and I feel like I can't understand it, as per usual, I tend to return back to this story. In doing some research into the different different myths, I should say. I've got gifts on the mind after that tale. An interesting one came from Chinese astronomy. Part of the Pisces constellation is known as the outer enclosure and was a gate that kept pigs from falling out into the marshes or cesspit in one of the explanations that I found. And I just found this very interesting. Really, right, a circle doesn't have a beginning or an end, right? But in the normal kind of ordering of the zodiac, Pisces is the end, and even in its glyph, it is sort of like it's a gate, you know? And I've always associated it with the gates to heaven. I feel like Pisces contains, I mentioned this in a different video, but it's not actually on my channel, so I'm going to mention it now. There's a myth that I heard about, or a story, a tale, and I believe it has a Jewish origin. Although when like searching for it online, it might be a little more modern. But how I originally heard it is that it's a Jewish story. And the tale goes that before you are incarnated, you know everything. And this is an idea that is present in multiple sort of spiritual understandings and traditions, and is something that feels very resonant to me personally. I've believed in reincarnation for as long as I can remember, even like in my earliest memories. I remember reading Bible stories and feeling like something was missing, and I already sort of inherently knew that it was a cycle. So this is very resonant for me. So the tale goes, before we are reincarnated, we know everything. We essentially are like signing up for the life that we will have on Earth. Give me a minute. We know the challenges that we will face, and we know our ultimate goals. We know the lessons we're headed here to learn. And so this myth goes, right before it happens, an angel touches us right here. And that's what makes this indent in our lips right here. They touch us and we forget. And to me, in my admittedly somewhat limited understanding of Pisces, I don't have Pisces in my personal chart. But in my understanding of Pisces, it's everything that's sort of encompassed in the forgetting and the remembrance. The undercurrent of, and now as I say this too, I've been pondering all morning and yesterday on the significance of the two fish, you know, one swimming in one direction, one going the other direction, thinking of it in more mundane terms of like going with the flow, but also asserting yourself, right? Because it's the idea of swimming upstream, and also it's the opposite fish, right? They're going in two different directions. And now as I talk about this, I'm thinking, you know, one of the fish is us setting out into the world, fresh, ready for new experiences, completely forgotten and cut off from the source. And the other fish is our eventual circle back around. At the end of the day, everything that we're doing here on Earth ends in death. It always ends in us coming back to the gates, returning to source. Those are the sort of musings and ponderings I've been having. I'm not going to be able to give you an extremely concise episode on the ramifications and meanings of Pisces, and I think that this is fitting because that's sort of how Pisces is, you know? Let's see. Have I gotten off track? One thing, and I think that this just comes down to the fact that, like, syncretization, which means, it just means when, like, certain gods are adopted by usually, like, conquering forces, you know, and the mixing and combining that happens. That's a layman's interpretation of syncretization. So I think that this is the product of syncretization, but both the Babylonian myth for the constellation of Pisces and the Greek myth for the constellation of Pisces have to do with a goddess associated with love. In the Babylonian one, and I've found different versions, which tends to be the case anytime you're looking into mythological sources, right? There's always multiple versions, but and this is tricky because it's the Babylonian constellation that I think encompasses Assyrian myth, but even then, in looking in that direction, I found the name of many different goddesses that are associated with this tale. It's usually a goddess associated with love that comes from the sea, right? In the Syrian goddess, who I believe was named Atargatis. And then from that name sprung a bunch of different names. Anyone who's done any looking into mythology will know that this is sort of how it rolls. There's always associated deities, right? But there's this tale of a goddess that is born from the sea. In one tale, it's a fish and a dove that finds the egg and brings it in to be born, and then this deity is born from it. In another myth, it's just a fish that finds the egg, or maybe even gives birth to the egg, and then two half man, half fish nurture it until, once again, a goddess is born from the egg. And then in the Aphrodite myth, Kim was born of sea foam, in certain tellings of it. But in the Aphrodite myth, it was when the Titans were attacking, two fish sprung up and either saved Aphrodite and I believe her son Eros, or Aphrodite and Eros turn into two fish and escape nonetheless. So one is a birth story, one is a savior sort of story. And savior myths can be found throughout Pisces as well. There's a deep connection to Jesus. But there's who, in my opinion, as an outsider looking in, because I've never, my great-grandparents were religious, and my grandmother definitely believed in Jesus, but wasn't so much a church goer, and it sort of filtered down through the family. So for me, I don't consider myself religious, but I have spent time pondering Christianity and Jesus specifically, who is a solar god in many, many ways, but that's an entirely different rabbit hole that I could go down another day, and others have gone down in a better way. So I probably won't go over that again, but who knows? Either way, from my understanding as an outsider, Jesus was also a deity of love. Not in the same way of, in the goddesses, it seems more of like an earthly, more of a sensual, sexual, fertility style love. And with Jesus, it was more of a love for all humankind, mankind, But there's definitely this connection throughout multiple tales of love, of the gate, of the liminal passage of our soul's journey. I'm just musing here on this one. Like I said, I don't have any hard conclusions that I've drawn. I'm just bringing up things that I find interesting. This is a really interesting new moon that especially ties into these themes of love, both in an earthly way and in a all-encompassing beyond way, because this new moon is conjunct Venus and Neptune, which are sitting at the late degrees of Aquarius, soon to be moving into Pisces as well. And so there's these major themes of love and compassion and surrender, I think. That's what's coming through at the moment. From a transmutation sort of perspective, shortly after the sun-moon, aka new moon conjunction, the moon will also pass over Chiron. So it's gonna go Venus, Neptune, a little bit Chiron. So I think that there are super, super major lessons coming up in regards to healing deep wounds and maybe healing isn't quite the correct word, you know, because the thing about Chiron is that it's never fully healed. This idea of healing is that one day it's all going to be better. But I think it's more a case of deep understanding that leads to less suffering. It doesn't necessarily go away, but meaning can be found and suffering can be alleviated. Really, in this talk about Pisces specifically, the process of incarnation is kind of the unhealed wound that we all have. You know, the soul is a much more infinite energy that, like, to contain it in a body is inherently a way of imprisoning it, you know. And as we move through life and we gain more understanding of all of our particular wounds and we make meaning of it and we start to you know, we go through life as the one fish and then we start to circle around and realize that it all comes back to source and we're all connected to one thing. It gets better, but at the end of the day, you know, it's still a process of making something so infinite, so small. You know, it's that tale, it links into the story that I read as well, in that we will go away and come back many times expecting it to be different, but at the end of the day, it's still trying to contain all of creation in a single body with such a narrow frame of perception. And I think on a collective level, something that we can really do during this time is to just, how do I put this? Be aware of the truth of the world, which is that every single one of us has all of our own wounding, you know, and like all of us are entire universes unto ourselves with so many vast experiences and at the same time limited perspective. Every single human has like been through shit, and I mean, even along this line of thinking, every single human, just by virtue of being incarnated, you know, starts off with, it's just a narrowing. And I'm going to have to stop on that particular sentence because I don't know where I'm going. I'm getting all over the place. But point being, it is good to extend compassion to our fellow humans, and it is good to extend compassion to ourselves and recognize that our frames of vision are very small, you know? There is an infinite universe inside every one of us, and there is an infinite universe outside every one of us, which we cannot see. We could not possibly see. It's why we continue to come back so that we can see more. And it's useful. See, normally I would say, this is all very useful. We should look at this in a productive way. How can we see all of these challenges as gifts and abilities to experience something new and to learn something new? But, when musing on Pisces, there needs to be a little bit of like room for the sorrow and room for the expression of that. I don't know, it's a very numinous time. As I say this, we're not quite in there, but things are creeping up closer and closer to Neptune, and the closer that the Sun and Venus gets to Neptune, the more expansive in like a foggy kind of way my thoughts on this get. I've been trying to say what I'm going to say. I've been planning a little ritual that all made very much sense back when I thought that this new moon was still happening in the late degrees of Aquarius. But the closer we get to the actual new moon, which is in Pisces, I find myself in a fog. This energy is much less purpose driven, and it's very much about the experience of just being. With this inner recognition of the nature of God, or the nature of Source, or the just nature of the infinite beyond, being here on Earth, there is also this underlying thread of awareness that we can only get up to the gates, that we are outside of the infinite possibilities. There is this underlying awareness of the prison that cannot necessarily just be, shuffled aside when this energy is very, very much in play. And, in that is, I want to be careful here. A friend of mine Jonathan Coe, he's a friend of mine, and lately he's got a lot of Piscean energy, I believe, even in the sidereal workings of things. And he's been talking about something recently that I want to give honor to, which is that a lot of artists have this connection to suffering, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the way that it is. If you heal these wounds, you will still be able to create, and you will still be able to be an artist, but there is a thread there for sure. And in striving for like great heights of artistic achievement, there is this thread of trying to achieve great heights of beauty that I think is linked to this desire to merge once again with Source and to, you know, penetrate the gates once again. So, you know, for this new moon, I would suggest some straight up meditation, you know, just sitting quietly with yourself and try and tune into that core essence, which is the everything. That's what I would suggest. And be compassionate and give space to your sensitivity. Give compassionate love to any hurts that may arise. Try and find deeper understanding for what it is that these wounds are teaching you. Find greater acceptance for your sensitivities and for your feelings. We're coming into a very spongy time. One activity also that I would suggest, this was more on my mind when I thought that this was going to be a new moon in Aquarius. Fitting that I get confused about a new moon conjunct Neptune. I mean, it's just funny. But a theme that has come up a lot in this Aquarius season in just like podcasts I'm listening to and things that I'm encountering is this idea around belonging. And in devising of ways to tap into this Aquarius energy and these healing potentials with Neptune and Venus, which are still there in Aquarius, I would suggest a good like journaling activity, just if you want to do some fun healing activities. Because this idea of belonging kept coming up, you know, and there are these ideas of creative genius and our uniqueness is tied up in Aquarius, you know. But I think that there's some definite child elements here, right? If we consider the polarity of Aquarius is Leo, I think that inner child work can be very, very useful to unlocking these like very, very unique parts of ourselves and our genius inside. And so if you feel like doing an exercise just to play around with that, I would suggest pulling out a paper and a pen and a journal, or, you know, that's one way to tackle it. Or another way would be to just meditate on it, maybe call forth your inner child. If you've never tried that, even if that seems silly, I suggest trying it. It's amazing what can come forward and present itself for healing. Then there's that word again, right? I feel compelled to, you know, just mention like healing isn't linear. It's not something that is done once and is over, you know, and especially with inner child work, it's less about healing and more about recognition. It's about hearing that little baby inside you and being like, okay, I hear you. I love you. I acknowledge you. So I would suggest getting out your journal and seeing what comes up around the idea of what it meant to be good when you were young. What did it mean to be a good kid? What did it mean to be a good son or daughter, you know? And another really rich area might be to look into times in social situations where you had to contract yourself and like ignore parts of yourself in order to fit in. Like, let's say you were super, super excited about something and your friend was like, oh my God, that's stupid. You know, or you were getting really into something and then someone you looked up to was like, oh, that's all a bunch of nonsense, you know, situations like that. So that can really tap us into sparks of things that like really truly interested us and were impulses to explore that we might have sort of started to shut our own genius down at the source, you know? So that would be an exercise that I would suggest in these coming days as things move into Pisces. I think everything's just going to start feeling like a lot more numinous, and I would say just everything that I already said, you know, be compassionate for yourself, for your sensitivities, hold space for that, honor that, and really just, I was too late. And really just make space for all the feelings that you might have, all the openness you may suddenly have available to you. Pisces can be a very spongy time where we are sensitive to all sorts of things going around us that we wouldn't necessarily notice, you know? So even just a fun activity might be to set your awareness to that and actively kind of try and open up your awareness and see what comes in, you know, see what expression you may have access to that is new, different, extra, you know? Those are just some ideas. That one other important concept of note is this idea of phasal relationships. You know, we observe the moon and its phasal relationships largely because it's evident to our eye what phase it's in, you know, but any planets can have phasal relationships, you know. With this new moon, we have Venus coming into conjunction with Neptune. Now, because Neptune is the slower moving planet, it is considered the stationary planet in this phasal relationship, right? So Venus is coming into conjunction with it. And as this is happening, as Venus is approaching, it is ending a cycle. Now, this could be involving how, I mean, in everyone's chart, it's going to hit completely differently, right? But from a collective perspective, this could be closing a cycle of our spiritual values, of how we receive messages from the divine, of how we receive in our reception in our relationship with spirit. And so, especially with this Chiron connection with the new moon, I would say that this is a really beautiful time. You know, I'm quick to jump ahead and say, well, then the conjunction will happen, and then thus, as Venus begins to pass Neptune, a new phase opens up. But that is jumping forward into the future. And I think in a lot of ways, our relationship with astrology, especially for those that came up in tropical, is sort of a constant looking to the future, and there's medicine and richness to be found in our present moment. And of the time of the actual new moon, I'm going to hop off 1 second just to check for sure. Yes, as of the new moon, thus the beginning of this lunar cycle, Venus is in the final degree of completing this cycle. So before I jump ahead and I start talking about this new cycle that will open up with Venus and Neptune, it may be very, very potent during this time to consider what has been your relationship and your reception to spirit thus far. What is changing? What are you feeling the urge to release and get rid of? Or perhaps what are the deep wisdoms that you are in the process of integrating? So that would probably be something that is going to be good to sit with on this new moon. And give time and honor to consider this cycle of reception and relationship with spirit and all that is beyond. Give just honor and time and a little sensitivity to the process of what is closing. And as the moon cycle unfolds, Venus will soon pass over Neptune, and as things do, life goes on, a new cycle will open. But during this time, maybe consider just honoring what has come. If you enjoyed this video, give me a subscribe, like my channel, all that jazz. I do this as a YouTube show, the Cosmic Wizard Show. If you're listening on audio, if you're watching on YouTube, I also do this as a podcast. It can be found on Apple, Spotify, possibly Google by now, SoundCloud. Follow me wherever I can catch you the most. And if this resonated with you, I encourage you to just let me know in the comments. I love to read what's going on. Do you feel like this is a whole new chapter coming to a close as far as your sort of spiritual perception is concerned? Or maybe tell me what Pisces season means to you. Or if you resonate with the idea of being trapped in this body outside the gates of heaven, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're interested in participating in the event that we're doing tomorrow, Friday, on the 12th, I will leave details in the show notes. You can hop on board and work with me personally. It's going to be a lot of fun. Goodbye for now. I love you all.